This program was made possible in part by a grant from Florida Public Broadcasting Service, Incorporated.
This is a beautiful place for the turtles. A lovely beach, no rocks, and no walls.
They follow her like the Pied Piper. They listen to her every word. And affectionately, they have named her the Turtle Lady of Juno Beach. Hello and welcome to Southern Circuit. I'm Rickley Stone. This week's journey begins on a 1-mile stretch of beach in South Florida, where for millions of years, sea turtles have come annually to lay their eggs. We'll meet the woman who's made it her business to protect the turtles, and the children who come to learn how. For more than 60 years, Pensacola's Mr. History has been collecting anything and everything. His Panhandle attic will soon become the T.T. Wentworth State Museum. It is indeed the gift of a lifetime. What was once the dream of 4 ambitious graduates of the University of Florida's Drama School is now a dream come true. Gainesville's Hippodrome Theatre is one of the state's finest. Tile artist Richard Sorrentino has made buildings his canvas. His art is familiar to patrons of both the Mayfair complex in Coconut Grove and Ybor City's Columbia restaurant. Many consider his unique style a lost art revived. We'll see how the artist feels about his work when we visit with him on this week's Southern Circuit. Stay with us.
These things you can't see anywhere in the world except on Juno Beach. And see them come up out of the sand. Nobody's done it before except Fletcher.
For millions of years, loggerhead, leatherback, and green sea turtles have been crawling up on the sands of Juno Beach to nest. Those that have come and gone over the last 15 years have been protected by Eleanor Fletcher, a 67-year-old self-taught naturalist, affectionately known as the Turtle Lady of Juno Beach.
I guess I'm an oddball, or a maverick, and I've always done something different or in a different way than anybody else. I detest, or I am bored with rote. I don't want to wash every Monday and iron every Tuesday, or do the dishes some nights after dinner. The heck with it. If there's something more interesting, the dishes can be done by any idiot in the morning or at midnight. Who cares? And this is my turtle jacket. And my permit, you know. And we're going down to the beach. And we're going to box one nest. We're going to put the eggs in here. So when they hatch, we can see them. Just follow me, because our nest is up there. I once heard a sermon by a minister, and he said, "Forever be childlike," not childish. Forever be childlike. And that is forever be asking the question, why? And the other one we're going to box is down. You should think about that. Why did this happen? Why does this happen? And if you live always trying to find the answer to the question why, you'll keep going forever. The tide gets higher every month on the full moon until September, and that's why we have hurricanes and the water reaches way, way up, right? So this has to be moved because in 2 months, the salt water will come just through the sand. It doesn't even have to wash out the eggs, and it kills all life in the egg. The salt water inside the egg. On my mile, the mile south of the pier, I have about 350 completed nests of the 3 kinds of turtles. Of course, the loggerheads, you know, lay twice as much as anything else. And that doesn't mean that many turtles, because the loggerheads come up 4 times, and the greens twice, and the leatherbacks twice. So there's a little algebra there somewhere, and I haven't figured it out yet. We keep this little white spot on top so that the turtle will grow. If we tipped it, it would be crippled in some way, and a crippled turtle is never born. Because if it can't take care of itself, it can be minus an arm or a leg, it can have a crooked back, but it must eat and be able to crawl over the sand, and it must be able to swim. And if it can't, somebody up there doesn't give it the cutting tooth to break the shell. Isn't that marvelous? It's all taken care of by nature. See these white spots? This nest is over 24 hours old.
I usually go down for a walk along the beach with my family, and we sometimes see her, and we talk to her. But one day, one of my dad's friends announced that Mrs. Fletcher needed help with the museum, and I volunteered for that.
Let's see how they look.
The Children's Museum of Juno Beach is expected to open next spring. This former motel, located on State Road A1A, will be refurbished to be used by the Turtle Lady as a natural science museum, emphasizing the sea turtles, which lay their eggs across the road on the town's beach.
And the turtles are so much like us. You know, they have arms and legs and hands, a heart. And they are cold-blooded, and we're warm-blooded. But they lay an egg, like we start from. There's so much about a turtle that is so much like us. Well, through this turtle, business or turtle work, you appreciate the forces of nature. And I don't mean, they aren't hidden. In the sea and the land and the sky. And if it weren't for the sun or the water and the land to place us somewhere, there would be no life at all.
You really think I'd screw up my own father's funeral?
I really think you might, yes.
Oh, Christ, El.
Well, you've done it before.
What do you mean? He never died before.
12 years ago, 4 young friends, fresh out of college, decided to start a theater troupe. Not a particularly unusual idea, but the style of their performances and their choice of works was indeed unusual. And it was that uniqueness, coupled with the stubborn determination of youth, that launched the group that called themselves the Hippodrome Theatre to a success that even they had not imagined.
Please stop.
We started in a little warehouse, plumbing warehouse type stores, about the size of a 7-Eleven with 8-foot ceilings and numerous limitations. One being that it wasn't anything like a theater, and we had to, create our own spaces, take down walls.
Are you going to make a speech or not?
Actually build our own lights, and we were out on the streets asking for coffee cans and trying to get enough money to buy floodlights and putting them together with zip cord and little house dimmers with rubber bands, so it started very, very basic.
We were all willing to just throw in everything we had, whatever money, and we all kind of lived together in a big house and worked for a while for nothing, and then got about $25 a week and started in a 7-Eleven. Just to find an alternative to the theater we had studied and had seen, of doing something that had heart and had meaning and was worth putting your life into.
Glad done, Eleanor. Give it to me, Barney.
I think what our audiences are treated to is a blend of different ideas, so they just don't have one artistic direction for the whole year. They come and see us develop different things.
And close the door after you, please. Tell Billy I'm fixing my dress. Period. Thank you. Enjoy the show.
Thank you.
Hi, Andrea.
Hippodrome.
A lot of the other theaters have a tendency to, I guess, compromise their artistic philosophy in order to gain audience. Here at the Hippodrome, the approach is a little different, and that is we were founded with a particular artistic philosophy, and that's what we're going to stick to, and hopefully we will find the audience that believes in that same philosophy. Instead of changing the philosophy, let's educate them. Let's let them know what we're attempting to do. And in 12 years, it's obviously worked because we're here. We've been growing for 12 years, and the audience has been growing. So I think probably we've done the best thing for the community by not giving in, by not changing our philosophy, and by letting people hopefully broaden their horizon and exposure to theater and to the arts.
In 1981, the Hippodrome became one of Florida's 3 state theaters and moved into a building previously slated for demolition, the historic old Federal Building in downtown Gainesville.
I kind of think of us as the renegade state theater, and I think they probably think of us that way too. When we come to the meetings, we're a little bit different, and I think we definitely use more contemporary material. We're not into the classics as much as Oslo. We don't get involved in some of the name material that the Coconut Grove does. We're seeking out more the newer scripts, new playwrights, a more cinematic approach, I think, also to theater. Why don't you do it full back up here? During that whole time, just be against this thing, just sort of kicking it and nudging it with your head, doing that whole thing, and then cross down.
All right. Most theaters have one artistic vision, one person, with, of course, a staff who helps feed that vision. Here, they started with 4 artistic co-directors. At one time, they had 5. We're now back down to 3, but it creates a completely different creative atmosphere because there are 3 different artists who are giving their input towards the same philosophy. That is also something that's very different and unique.
You miss your mother.
I hardly remember her, Dad.
I miss her.
I know you do, Dad.
I miss her so much sometimes that I almost lose control.
I know, Dad.
But I hang on.
Philosophy is basically to present the finest in contemporary and classical theater, particularly with an eye onto being somewhat experimental.
I'm not sure that you could just lift this up and blow us in a cyclone to Kansas and it would work there. I think that this theater works here because of the makeup of the community. It's a very liberal community, very educated community.
I think the community wants us here, and I think that we want to be here, so I think that seems like the future.
Hey, Dad, I'll tell you what. Let's have a compromise, okay? You go back out there, and I'll go to the movies, okay?
I told you this morning, no.
But it's Errol Flynn and Robin Hood, Dad. They brought it back.
And you've seen it already.
Oh, but I could see it again. I could see it 1,000 times. I love that movie.
No! I'm sorry, Barney.
No one has a collection as large or perhaps as diversified as this one.
Okay, it's old-time ship lamp.
Oh, another wedding.
Purchased in 1858.
This can go with the boxes. What is in that fancy box over here?
It was a collection not determined by any academic areas, but a collection in which the person, Mr. Wentworth, accepted nearly everything. And thus, that's what this collection contains, nearly everything.
This diversity of information, documentation, rare items that depict the way of life from the Spanish era to the space age.
Theodore Thomas Wentworth, Pensacola's Mr. Tom, is a man who you might say has something to show for his life.
I'd collect most anything. Whatever I got a hold to, I saved. And like most people, they'd throw it away, but I saved it.
If you need to look at an alligator head, there's one of them. If you need bison horns, there's those. They're insects traditionally in formaldehyde or alcohol. So you have natural history. You have a variety of historical things, both three-dimensional and in document form. Some of them going back to the 16th century in terms of maps and so forth. And then you have a wide variety of automotive material. You have costumes, you have furniture, kitchen material and farming implements and bricks, a whole history of brickmaking. So there's a good deal of material which probably in itself could be the basis for 1,000 different kinds of exhibitions, no two of which would be alike.
You got a case for eyeglasses, right?
Right.
Okay, here's 2 pair.
Okay.
1906. 8 years old. I had found a gold dollar on the beach in Pensacola, and from then on I started collecting. Anything that had history value to it, anything that was historically valuable. Didn't make any difference what it was. Some of them I found on the street, and some people gave me most of the stuff that I had. They knew I was collecting, so they just give me things that they didn't want, and that's the way I got them.
How do you know what's got value or what will one day be historically important?
Well, you can't tell. You just have to take and wait and see. Most of the stuff, those got value to it. Most everything's got value. If it hadn't got a value when you get it, it'll have a value later on.
He's one of the people who Horatio Alger was talking about. You pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. With a limited formal education, he was able to do extremely well. He was the first and youngest elected county commissioner in Escambia County at the age of 21. He became a tax collector a few years later. He was a person who was the president of the Historical Society in his early years. So he's truly an amazing person because all of this was done without a formal education.
He has a great sense of the past, and I think even during his lifetime, which covers most of this century, that he has seen so much of that erode away. He saw the opportunity to save a little bit of his heritage, and I think it became the biggest part of his life.
He knows where every piece fits. There's nothing he doesn't recognize in the collection. If there are 100,000 items or more, he knows every one of those, and he knows pretty much who gave every one of those.
I just value everything. I haven't got any special ones. I mean, everything is near and dear to me. In other words, everything is really worth keeping. And I want to see that it's preserved forever. And that's the reason that the folks downtown, I gave it to them, and with the understanding that it'd be kept in Pensacola and displayed always.
Pensacola will now have a state museum where people can come and see the culture and the folk life and the real history of where Florida began.
We're going to try a new technique, we hope, and that is to make the stored material available to the public. Usually it is not, and we will probably have what we call an open storage technique, which allows the public to view the items which are not on exhibit in the museum building.
The total variety of the material and the fact that you never know what you're going to find when you open up a box or a drawer or even, you know, just the door on a Victrola. You just don't know what you're going to find because he has squirrel things everywhere.
I got memories on everything. It brings back memories to me when I go through this museum. It's like always interesting to me. Regardless of how many times I see it or view with it, I'm always proud to come over here and look at it.
I'll tell you, the tiles themselves will outlive the buildings that they're put on. And God knows where they'll wind up, or who'll discover them 100, 200, 1,000 years from now. It's kind of a nice idea, somebody digging up a tile or a fragment of a tile and seeing my name on there and wondering who was this person and what did he go through and why in the 80s did he decide to do something at that point in time when the whole world was going technologically crazy.
Richard Sorrentino is a tile artist who lives and works in his Ybor City studio. He's best known for his European tile paintings and restoration work, a talent he began to specialize in after completing a 2-year project for the world's oldest and largest Spanish restaurant, the Columbia Restaurant in Ybor City.
The work on the Spanish restaurant got instant recognition because everyone could relate to the content of the imagery, and it was part of their culture. That immediately got me into places that I wouldn't normally have gotten into, and that was exciting to have that kind of flexibility and immediate success and acceptance for what I did.
As far as his talent is concerned, he's very, very talented. I think that it's a great opportunity for all of the people of America who have an opportunity to see his work to become acquainted with him. We have some great tiles here by a very famous artist by the name of Posada, who left Spain during the Spanish Revolution and became involved in producing tile in Mexico. And we bought some of his tiles very cheaply after he arrived in Mexico, and now they're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they're embedded in our walls here. And I would not be at all surprised if Richard Sorrentino might not fall into the same category. Somewhere along the line he will become very famous, and we'll say we bought some of Richard Sorrentino's at a very reasonable price, and now they're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars.
What I do is very particular, and what makes it acceptable is working with architects and interior designers and putting their ideas into reality as well as my own. I'm really working as a team as opposed to as an individual artist who's tucked away in his studio doing work for himself. It's more of a business approach to art. Yeah, that's beautiful. Of course, these are all been cut to shape to fit the sizes.
Can we get smaller signs to match these?
Yeah, they can be made any size we want.
He brings a craft that's almost dead in this country, the old Spanish Moorish tile tradition. So that intrigued me initially. And of course, Richard's a good artist, so that I always look for good artists. And then it has to be an artist that isn't in the idea of commercial art, where they're only interested in their own fame. They have to be artists that are interested in being part of a building, being part of a neighborhood. So if you do tiles for a restaurant in Ybor City, it's part of my philosophy. Food and the smell of food and the taste of food and the Spanish tile and the little details are what I like. So I wanted to import that Tampa tradition to Coconut Grove.
Anything you could come up with in your imagination can be put on tile. And I'd like to see it used more in public spaces. That's really been my dream. The more I see, the more possibilities I see that way, the more it encourages me to go out and beat the bushes to find those jobs.
Well, he really can do anything. I mean, I saw the classical work, which is the old world murals, which you see all over the Mediterranean countries. It's what has made tile famous and so beautiful in the European countries. But once I got into the shop and saw some of the other work that he's done, he does very contemporary things, he can do punk new wave. I mean, he can do anything really that you want because he's got a background as an artist.
Interacting with this gallery has afforded me an opportunity to develop a style that's representative of what I like to do, okay? And these are contemporary images that are going to be based on what I call Florida folklore. And that's contemporary Florida folklore, not historic folklore, although we'll be going into that as well here. And what I've basically done here is taken images that I have seen my son draw and re-looked at them through my eye, all right, and put them on, in this case, ware, but there's no reason why they couldn't be done on tile as well. Working on ware in this format is a way to, well, it's something that someone can take with them as opposed to thinking about doing a whole wall in this style. And Sonny's been instrumental in that way in opening me up to the opportunity that I can do that, as opposed to doing restoration work or interpreting someone else's ideas through my hands. I don't go to sleep at night wondering about the mark I'm making on the world. I think that'll happen as long as I continue to do what I do best. And that's to give my all for what that is, you know, and that's painting. I'm really a painter at heart. And tile. These tiles and this work will outlive me and my children and their children. I don't know if I could say that working on oils, on canvas, or acrylics, or in any other medium. That's kind of, that's a nice thing to think about as an artist. Living, I don't think about it all the time, but that's a byproduct of what I do that really makes me feel special that way.
Thank you for being with us for this week's Southern Circuit. Be sure and join us again next week when Southern Circuit returns to Coconut Grove to meet the Empress of the Everglades. She's Marjorie Stoneman Douglas. We'll also make stops in Tallahassee, Gainesville, and Bevel's Corner in Central Florida. We hope to see you then. Have a good week.
This program was made possible in part by a grant from Florida Public Broadcasting Service, Incorporated.